All right, welcome everybody. In the interest of time and to reward everybody who's arrived on time, we will start the webinar now. So welcome everybody to the TARC webinar, which is titled Get to the Point, This and More Tips for Great Presentation Skills. So I'm looking forward to this, and I'll introduce Alex to you in a moment. So for those of you who don't know, I beg your pardon, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land in which we meet today. For us here in Townsville, it's the Woolgoolakabba and Bindals people, and I pay my respects to their rich cultures and their knowledge, and also to their elders past and present. So for those of you who don't know us, we are the Tropical Australian Academic Health Centre, known as TARC. We have a partnership with 8 partner member organisations, of which most of you belong. So we are partnership with the 5 Northern Queensland HHSs, so that's Cairns and Hinterland, Mackay, Northwest Torres and Cape and Townsville, also the Northern Queensland PHN and the Queensland and Aboriginal Islander Health Council and James Cook University. Over on the right-hand side, these are the themes, the research themes that we work towards, and we structure our programs and our information about. Our seed funding, our clinical fellowship funding, all ties to these kind of research themes. Down on the bottom left-hand corner is our website. If you don't know much about us, or if you're interested in catching up on the different webinars or the skills sessions that we've run, you can find us there on the YouTube channel in the website. So all recordings, all webinars are recorded and are up on the YouTube channel as probably within 30 hours of being presented. But a little bit of housekeeping for us all. Please mute your microphones until the Q&A section, which will happen in around about 45 minutes. This is scheduled after Alex's presentation. Either feel free to raise your hand and we'll call you out so you can ask your question live, or if you're a little bit shy, feel like you can put them in the chat and I'll try and monitor that and make sure that we can ask that. We'd also, in the Q&A section, we would really like to see your faces. It's much nicer to be able to see faces than when we're talking to you directly. So if you're able to, and if you have a camera that's operational, in the Q&A section, it would be great if you turned that on. But enough from me. You're not here to hear it from me. You're here to hear from Alex. And Alex is Alexandra Trollope, and she is a senior lecturer in anatomy at James Cook University, and she studies epigenetics. This is a really important talk. A lot of you are going to be presenting some of your research within the next month, and I'm pleased to see that you've decided to attend today. But giving great and memorable presentations is critical if you want to tell someone about your research, right? In a wonderful hypothetical scenario, you could be standing in a lift with a millionaire and that person can turn to you and go, "What do you do? I've got some spare money," right? You have to know, what's your story? How are you going to talk to this person? If you want this $1 million, how are you going to face that? So you need to think about, what is your pitch? Do you have one? So Alex is going to talk to us all about the tips and the tricks. She's a communication specialist. She takes her topic very, very seriously, and she's here to help you. So enough from me. Alex, we welcome you. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing and I will turn my camera off so that you can have the floor. Thanks.
Thank you, Ray. Okay, I've got to share my screen now. This is my first test. Okay, can everybody see my get to the point slide?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to, as Ray said, I'm going to try and just share some of my knowledge with you. So I am an anatomy lecturer. I've been doing lecturing for probably about 12 years now. But before that, I was more of a researcher. So my background is PhD in epigenetics. I now do a lot of work in the stroke field as well. And then I came over here to do some teaching, and I've been doing that for a very long time. But my tips and tricks, the first thing I just want to clarify is, what is the point of presenting? Because a lot of the time we do all this research, we write up a paper, we submit it, it gets published. Why can't people just read that? Why do we need to stand in front of them and tell them all about our research? And essentially, it's so you can get your message out there in a clear way, in a human way as well, so you can actually talk to people. It's one thing to read an article. It's a completely different thing to have someone stand up with enthusiasm, with engagement, and tell you about why their research is so important and why you need to know about it. So you need to be able to deliver a really clear message, and you can do that by presenting your work. It's also, when you go to a conference, a really good place to do some networking and to collaborate with people. Research, as I'm sure you're aware now, isn't done in isolation. It is a team effort, whether you need to recruit specialists into your project or whether you need to recruit a statistician, for example, you will need to build a team around you. It's not something done in isolation. So going to conferences and actually networking and finding people to work with is a part of research itself. So an oral presentation should not be something that you stand up and you basically read from something that you plan to publish or are going to publish. I have a system, and it's basically 4 Ps for success. And this is what I build all my presentations around. The first thing is planning. You need to have a plan as to how you're going to execute this presentation. And putting the planning in to start with can actually get rid of a lot of those nerves that we all get when we have to present in front of people. Prepare. You have to prepare the slides. So you have to get all of your materials ready, and you have to make sure that they're going to be consistent and clear. Practice is so important, especially when you're starting out to give presentations. Again, it can help with nerves. It can help you feel more better about being able to deliver in front of people. And it can also help you pick up mistakes and issues with your presentation. And then finally, probably one of the most important components of the 4 Ps is that it's a performance. Now, some of us are naturally more geared up to perform than others, but essentially a presentation is you being up front and center in front of an audience, and you are giving a performance where you're trying to keep people engaged. You've got to hold people's attention for a set amount of time, and that can be really difficult, especially when people tend to not have very long attention spans. So keeping people engaged with a good performance is really important too. So planning, these are the 4 major things you have to really ask yourself when you're planning a presentation. The first thing is, who is your audience? Who are you giving this presentation to? You also need to know, what is your message? Every presentation should have a clear, concise message that you want people to walk away from the presentation thinking about. That's what you want them to think about when they leave. Where are you presenting as well? So this has changed in recent times. It always used to be you were the lecturer in front of a room full of people, and that's how you delivered a presentation. And now, as we can all see, we do a lot of presenting online, and it is a completely different space to be in. What's the brief? So generally, when you go to a conference, you are actually given guidelines. They will tell you what things you need to include, what your time limit is, and you're given set parameters. You need to make sure you stick to those. So your audience. Now, generally, we think of presenting to our peers. So that's other students, other specialists in your field, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you might be presenting to students, and that would be more of a place where you are teaching. So that's a different way to present as well. And as Ray mentioned, you might bump into a millionaire in the lift, and you need to give them a really quick pitch, and you need to be able to deliver your research to the general public. Now, each one of those groups of people will have different knowledge sets, and that's something you need to consider. So your peers, for example, they will have a base knowledge. They will have a set knowledge, so you can start that little bit higher. If you work in cardiovascular research, for example, you might go to an arteriosclerosis conference. You know the people in the room are going to have a base knowledge around arteriosclerosis and what arteries are. The general public won't have that. They might not even know what the difference is between an artery and a vein. So you have to pitch it at the appropriate level. If you don't, you'll lose people. And as soon as you lose people in your audience, they disengage and they switch off, and you've lost them straight away. So starting at that level that's appropriate for your audience is really important. What message are you trying to give these people as well? And again, that can be different depending on what you're presenting and who you're presenting to as well. Try to repeat your message throughout your presentation as well, just so those core concepts are getting across and it keeps people on board with the message that you're trying to deliver to them. And essentially be able to summarize and emphasize where it's really important. Planning. So you really have to plan out where you're going to be presenting as well. Face-to-face is very different from online. Now, when I'm presenting face-to-face, I check everything. I don't leave anything to chance, because I've been caught out many, many times when I've been especially lecturing. Conferences, generally they're set up for you, but you can still run into problems. So some of the tips for just making sure your presentation runs smoothly, just some of these things below here. So we all know about the Mac PC issues, especially if you've got a Mac and you're going to present on a PC, straight away that can cause you some software issues. Microphones. Microphones, I generally don't use microphones, but there have been some cases where I have to. If you're delivering across campuses, for example, you would need to have a microphone so the other campus can hear you, especially if you're somebody that's quite mobile and likes to walk around. You will need to have a microphone, and this can either be in your hand, or quite often now you get the ones where you clip them on to your top and then it has a big battery pack. Now, again, I've made the mistake of forgetting that I'm delivering across campus, and I go into the lecture theatre and I'm wearing a dress and I have nowhere to clip my battery pack. So I've had to shove it underneath my bra strap or put it somewhere, because I like to use my hands. I don't want to have something in my hands if I can help it, because I like to emphasize points with my hands. So microphones can be a bit tricky. Again, if you can go and have a look at the setup in the room, go and have a look. Hardware, sometimes you're going to want to use different mediums when you're presenting, if it's the right place to do so. Overhead projectors, you might want to draw a pathway. If you're talking about a specific pathway in your research, instead of just showing it on the screen, you could draw it out for people. Not only is that a great way to show that you know this pathway really well and that you're really confident with the material that you're dealing with, but drawing things step by step allows people to follow you as well. So have a backup plan. Another reason to have a backup plan, and again, I've been caught out here as well, is I would always take my laptop with me, because that's got my presentation on, and I'd go to the place that I'm delivering a presentation. I would plug my computer in so that it connects to the screens, and then I'd get some kind of error message or low battery power, your computer's about to shut down. And a few times I've been caught out by this, and I've had to run back to my office and grab a USB stick. But if you're presenting at a conference and you don't have a USB stick, you then have to ask somebody to borrow a charger. It's just not as professional as it could be. So I always take the laptop and the USB stick as well. Just have a backup for your backup in case you need it, because you don't want to be at a conference that you might have paid to go to and you don't have your presentation with you. I always test audiovisual equipment as well. This is just because I've been caught out, and it can really throw you off balance. And if you're already nervous and then there's an issue, a technical issue with your slides or with a video, it can really upset you and just put you in the wrong frame of mind to deliver a confident presentation. So I always check videos. If you are using a video, put your presentation onto the computer. Often they like you to put it straight onto the computer so they don't have to faff with USB sticks. Just quickly before the next person comes along, open up your presentation, make sure the animations are working, that your video's playing, that the volume's on as well. I've tried to play videos at presentations and there's no sound. And then you kind of go, oh, that video was really important. I don't know how to show people what the video is going to show them. And it completely throws you. And sometimes it can just completely dislink your presentation as well. So I always have the video embedded in the presentation and I have the URL link. If it's an outsourced one, the URL link, you can copy and paste that into Google and you can get to it another way if it's really important video to actually show people. Lighting, something that you don't really think about, but lighting can actually be quite important too. Again, for a conference, they should have this sorted for you. You want the lights so that people don't fall asleep, because that can actually happen. I've seen it happen where people have nodded off during presentations. And also, if you have a presentation that is black, and I love black slides with neon colors, I think it looks amazing. You might want the lights in the room down a little bit, just to show your presentation at its best. So something to consider as well. Now, if you're presenting online, this feels very different. I personally do not like presenting online. I like to be in a room with people that I can see and I can gauge responses, I can gauge reactions, I can see if I'm losing people, so I can bring things back and then go over a point again. And you can really get a feel for what's happening in the room, and you can control the atmosphere in the room because you're center stage. You're controlling what's going on in the room. Everybody's looking at you. So when you're presenting on Zoom, it's very different. So again, this is more about technical stuff. Just check your camera works. Okay, there's been presentations where people's cameras don't work and then they're presenting and they can't even be seen. Microphones, again, just check all of it's working. Make sure you know where the share button is, and also make sure you know where the leave button is so you can get out gracefully as well. I always put on my door a do not disturb. I've actually locked my door as well, because again, there's nothing worse than someone coming in and disturbing you, asking you questions when you're in the middle of giving a presentation. It just doesn't look as good. So make sure you have do not disturb on your door. People can't get in and disturb you. And check your background. My background's pretty good. I wiped my whiteboard so it's nice and clean. So just make sure the environment you're in is going to work when you're presenting online. Don't go to the library and expect to be able to give an engaging presentation with people walking around behind you. Try and get yourself set up for success rather than putting yourself in a position where you can get disturbed. And what is the brief? So generally, you're giving guidelines as to what they want you to present. It might have a specific format. They might ask you to add authors, not add authors. Sometimes if it's a conference where you're presenting data for your research, the conference might ask you to actually have your ethics number there as well, just so they know that you've got one. You should always have one anyway, but sometimes it's a requirement. So just make sure you stick to the brief and the guidelines that they actually give you for the conference. Timing is everything. The number of slides that you have is really important, and how you pace yourself as well. Again, I've seen people in a 50-minute lecture put up 60, 70 slides. Now that does not work out well. If you have an equal ratio of slides to the time that you have, that's too many, because you're not going to spend less than 60 seconds on every single slide that you have. And some of your slides, you might have a complicated pathway, you might have some data that you need to go through. And this is why practice is really important. Being able to pace yourself, seeing what slides you don't need. Repetition can kill a presentation in lots of ways. It can take you over the limit It's unnecessary material that you're showing, and you're not getting to the point quick enough. You need to be getting to the point and reinforcing it, but not padding slides and putting in extra. So timing is important, and they'll tell you how much time you have, and it can vary. It could be a 10-minute conference, it could be 30 minutes, it could be 50 minutes, and that time is crucial, and it will tell you how many slides you need and how quickly you're going to be going through your presentation. You don't want to go through really, really quickly. You can plan for your questions. Questions are always a difficult time for a lot of people when they're presenting, because it's the bit that you can't control. You don't know what you're going to be asked, and you realistically can't prepare for everything, but you can try and prepare for some of it. So you know your research better than anyone. You'll know what the limitations are. You'll know what you were able to do and what you weren't able to do. And quite often, if you can see gaps, that's what potentially people in the audience will see as well. So you can preempt some questions and get some practice questions, responses back for those questions. For your slides, if you want to be really good and really slick, those questions that you've preempted that you're going to get from the audience, have some additional slides. You can have extra slides specifically for the questions that you might get. And it always looks really nice when someone asks you a question and says, oh, you know, you didn't have any data for this. Did you not look at this time point? Did you not look at this particular aspect of the project? And you can say, well, actually, we did. Here's the data. Flick to that slide. This is the data. I didn't have time to present this, but here it is. Take them through the data, and then you've just shown that you came prepared for your presentation as well. And that always looks good. And a visual representation is always good to have as well. Now, palm cards and scripts. So I know a lot of students like to have scripts, and writing a script out to start with can be a really good way to kind of gauge how much you want to say on each slide and what you need to say. So you can map it all out that way with a script. But I do say you have to be very careful with scripts. And that's because if you are stood in front of an audience and you've got this piece of paper and you're reading off this piece of paper, you're not engaging people and you become a non-entity. You're just a voice in the room. So scripts are good for practice. Try and get rid of them if you can. If you're really worried, and because some people just like to have some kind of script as a backup, as a, oh, if I forget what I'm going to say, I've got something I can refer to. If you have to have a script, put it on palm cards because they're less obvious. They'll still be in your hand. People will still know that you've got them, but they look less clunky than this big bit of paper and you're reading verbatim off it. It's just not so good. And I've never really used palm cards myself because I find sometimes they can be more clunky. So unless you're really good and you kind of like have a palm card per slide with bullet points, and then you can flick through every time you move on to the next slide, you move on to the next card. If you get confused, you forget to move a card over, or you lose track of where you are, it can cause confusion, and then you're spending time flicking through your cards, trying to find the right one to go with the slide that you're talking about. My advice is if you feel confident enough to just get rid of those prompts, ditch them. But what you can do is use your slides as the prompts. I've just done it now. So if you have really clear bullet points, if you get lost, you can just refer to your slide and go, oh yeah, I said that one. Oh, that's it, I got to here. And then you talk around the bullet point. Don't read the bullet points. Everybody else can read, but you can go, oh yeah, gaps in presentations. I forgot to mention that. And then you can say something about it. So the slides are for the audience, but they're also really good for you as well. So you know where you are without having to go through palm cards or go through a piece of scrappy paper that you've got. So the next part of getting your presentation to be a success is preparing the slides themselves. So you've done your planning, you know your time, you know what you need to include in it, and now you've got to put stuff on your slides. The slides should be clear, they should be consistent, and they should be concise. And this is all about getting to the point. Don't overload the slides. This is just an example. I know a lot of you have got a symposium coming up. I'm not 100% sure of the format that you're delivering in, but as a general rule for research, these are the kind of points that you go through. So you have an introduction, you have your title of it, you have the authors on there, and always remember to include all the authors who've contributed as well on your presentation. When you're talking about the research, always use we, because I dare say it wasn't just you. There's lots of other people that are involved in the research. Aims, objectives, your method, results, discussion, summary, and acknowledgements. All of these things are important to cover, but sometimes conferences will tell you not to present the methods. They'll just want you to give specific components because it might be a shorter talk. Getting through all of these components within 30 minutes could be a challenge. So again, you have to be really clear on what you want to use. You don't have to use everything. Pick out the good stuff, use that, and then additional stuff, just like you do with a paper, you've got a supplementary, stick it in the back slides. And then if you need to come back to it for questions, you can just go back to it later. So clear images, clear text. If you have pathways like this MAP kinase pathway here, if you have a pathway like this, don't just stick it up on your slide and let the audience fend for themselves. If you use complicated images, complex images like this, you will need to help the audience. You will need to guide them through this. They might already be aware of this pathway, but you might have a drug that's intervening at some point in this pathway, and you need to kind of spell it out to them. Keep everybody together. Not everybody in the room might be all over these pathways. So if you have a complex image, don't ignore it. Use it. Otherwise, it's almost like, well, why have you put that there? It's not assisting. It's not helping your talk. Talk to the complex images. If it's a straightforward image like a meme or something like that, you don't need to read that out. But something like this would need you to draw attention to it. And again, don't overload the slides. If you were to put something like this up, I mean, it looks very impressive. There's an awful lot of data on there. But what does it actually mean? And how are you going to tell everybody in the audience what all of these graphs mean? And if you've got information like this on there, it's going to overwhelm the audience. And again, they will disengage and go, well, why is that there? I've got absolutely no idea what this is showing. And when you have a graph or you have a table, it's always good to have a little figure legend. It's got to have a title so people can go, oh yeah, that's what that graph's showing. And if you have the figure legend underneath, it helps people keep track. So if you've got somebody in the audience and they're particularly interested in this graph that you've shown, and it's down as figure 2, they can just make a note and go, oh, I've got a question about figure 2. And then when they come to questions, they'll go say, oh, you know, that graph that you had, it was figure 2. Then they can refer to it and you can know exactly which slide you need to go back to and you need to talk about. But if you do have a figure legend, don't put loads of writing on there like you would do for your paper. Just put something really simple so people understand what it's showing. And again, if you're using graphs and tables, don't just put it up and then talk about something else. Refer to it directly. Why is that graph there? Why are you showing the audience this data? What does it mean? Clear images. I've seen lots of conference presentations and people have images and they're fuzzy and they're blurry and you just think, why? Why have you got this furry image? I can see it's a cat, but why is it blurry? It just, again, it doesn't look very professional. So make sure your images are clear if you're going to show them. Be aware of copyright as well. If you do use memes in your presentation or anything like that, you do need to be aware of copyright and always copy in the link to the images that you've been using. Be concise. So as I mentioned previously, don't pad your slides. Some people get nervous and they think, oh, I'm going to run out of stuff to talk about. I've been given a 50-minute lecture. I don't have enough to say. You will have enough to say if you've practiced. If you've practiced your presentation, you will have paced yourself according to the slides that you've got. But people tend to ram stuff in case they run out of things to say. If you're in a presentation and you've got 50 minutes worth and you finish at 40, 45 minutes, but you've delivered everything well and the pace was good, nobody's going to judge you for that. And nobody's going to think, oh, they didn't use all the time. Clearly it was a substandard presentation that they delivered. No, if anything, they'll thank you and go, great, I have 5-10 minutes to just reset before the next presentation starts. So if you finish a bit early, but you covered everything at a good pace, don't worry about finishing a bit early. Just don't pad it. Just get to the point. And that's all you need to do. Bullet points are great. Again, don't put lots of text on the slide and don't read from the slide. Be consistent. Watch your spellings. I always have spelling mistakes in my slides. It just seems to be something that happens to me and I'm not sure why. 1 or 2. Don't worry so much about it. If you've got consistent lots of spelling mistakes, it will get noticed. So if you're worried about that, again, practice, present it to someone, your peers, your friends will pick up and say, you spelt that wrong, well, that's not right. And that will help you refine your presentation as well. Font size, if you can't read it from a distance, don't put it up. If people can't read what you've put up on the slides, just don't, there's no point in putting it there. People have to be able to read what you've put up on your slide. So as a general rule, font 18 is generally the minimum, especially if you're in a big lecture theatre, because people at the back of the room won't see it. So font 18 is generally a good size to limit yourself to if you can. If you start getting smaller, I mean, this is font 10, font 5, it's just not going to be visible from the back of the room. And again, if people can't read your points, they're just going to disengage. So limit your slides and use colour. Always use colour. Don't ever just give a black and white presentation. It's very boring. So put in colour and try and be fairly reserved with the colour. I tend to put in too much colour because I get very excited about it. But colour's really important for engagement and for keeping people interested in what you're presenting as well. So practice, one of our other 4 Ps. Practice is so important, so that I've just repeated it here. Practice, practice, practice. Practicing is so important for so many reasons, and this is a few of them. If you practice in front of your peers, that's great. If you can book the room that you're going to be presenting in, even better. When I first started teaching, I was always so nervous, and going to a room I didn't know the layout in really freaked me out. So I would always have to go to the room and look at it and just see where the lectern was or the podium. Okay, that's where I'll be. That's where my audience is. Okay, I've got 2 screens instead of 1. And it would just straight away calm my nerves. And I could visualize myself in that room giving the presentation. But going into a room and you're kind of expecting it to be small and you walk in and it's this giant lecture theatre, again, it can just make you really nervous. And one of the main things about practice is to control your nerves. And everybody, even seasoned professors, get nervous. Everybody does. You're about to stand in front of an audience of people. Everybody gets nervous. You just get better at dealing with the nerves and keeping them in check. Know your stuff. Now, this sounds pretty basic, but you do need to know your stuff. Anything that you have on your slides is fair game for questions. So don't present stuff that you're not 100% sure what it is or what it means or how it was done. So things that you have on your slide, just make sure you know what it means and you'll be able to describe it to somebody if they ask for clarification. Use your slides if you get stuck. Your slides are so important. If you get really stuck, you can flick back to your slides and use them as prompts. Recording yourself. Now, this seems a bit weird to record yourself, especially to video record yourself, but it's actually really useful. Again, it's useful to pace yourself. Are you, going at the right speed? It will help you determine how quickly you're talking. And again, I had a big issue with this when I used to talk. So I would talk really, 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 really quickly. I'm naturally a fast talker. So I really have to think about slowing down. And there are things that you can do to help slow down. You'll also find out if you use filler words like right, like, okay. I went through a phase of every time I went to a new slide, I go, okay. And I didn't know I was doing it until I watched a recording and I was thinking, oh, that's pretty obvious. Everybody has filler words. Just you can find out what yours are and then just try and reduce them as much as you can. And do you look relaxed or do you look really stressed out? Do you pace? So if you film yourself in the actual room, are you going to start pacing, which isn't good? Movement's good, but if you're pacing like a caged animal, you just look really stressed out. So speaking too fast, how I used to get around this, because it was a really big problem, because I got nervous, I sped up and I went even faster. I used to take a bottle of water with me and I'd have it on the lectern. And then every now and then I just remind myself to take a drink of water. And just doing that slowed me down. It gave everybody in the audience a chance to catch up to where I was and just gave everybody that little bit of a break. Pauses are actually really good and they can be really effective if you're trying to create drama or emphasize a point. Make your point and then go quiet for a bit. You've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and silence is generally something that makes people uncomfortable. So water and sipping water can really help. Shaking hands. Again, this is something that we do if we get nervous. So if you've got shaky hands or a shaky voice, the shaky voice, people generally don't hear it. You're hearing that, so just keep going. If your hands are shaking and you've got a laser pointer, I circle. If you try and pinpoint something and you're nervous, your hand's going to shake and it's going to be really obvious. But if you just do little circles on the thing you're trying to highlight, you don't look nervous. It looks like a purposeful movement and not one that you're actually freaking out and you're really worried about what's happening. Dress for success. Now, what I mean by that is don't get dressed up in a ball gown or anything like that. Dress so you're comfortable. Your comfort will help increase your confidence. I would never wear pointy high heels to a lecture because I just don't feel comfortable in them. I'd have these really safe, secure boots that made me feel comfortable, and that's what I wore. I wore what I felt good in. So dress for your confidence, not what people are expecting you to wear. Smart casual is fine. Don't apologize and don't say how nervous you are. We're all nervous. It's okay. And the last one, performance. So this is really important. Engagement with your audience is really important. You've got to be professional, use appropriate language, guide your audience as well. And you can start with a story. Stories are great, especially as an opener. If you can really start to sell a story at the beginning, people want to know what the ending is. They go, oh, this is quite an interesting story. I wonder how it ends. And then you can finish on the ending as well. And it keeps people on board. They want to know what happens. So that's a great way to deliver presentations if you can as well. You can do active audience participation. I use this one cautiously. It depends on where you are presenting. If it's a research conference, you can have a survey in between, just to break up the presentation, but don't overuse those platforms because it's not about you getting information from the audience. It's about you delivering your message to the audience. So just be careful with how active you want those the audience members to be. And sometimes if they get really into it, it's hard to get them to be quiet so you can carry on. Movement. So movement's really important. You need to connect with the audience. And if you are a moving object, people tend to look at you more. So some people will stand behind the podium because they feel safe. They've got a barrier in between themselves and the people on the other side. I recommend, if you can, get out and get in front of the podium. Movement will make people want to look at you. If you're really static, you kind of become part of the furniture. But if you're moving, not pacing, that can actually really help. Now, in terms of settling nerves as well, I used to try and learn all of my slides off by heart. That was really difficult and it didn't work very well. So now what I tend to do is I memorize the first 2 or 3 slides, and then that just settles you. It just settles you into your movements, it settles you into your pace, it just calms your nerves because you've got those first 3 slides out the way and nothing bad happened. So you can then build your confidence because you've started well. It's going well. I've done the first 3 slides. Let's keep going. So I think the start's really crucial to a good performance. Enthusiasm. I always have the motto, if I'm having a good time, then everybody else is having a good time too. My theory behind that is because if you're engaging them and you're enthusiastic and you're having a good time, other people will feel that energy. They'll get on board with it. So you control the atmosphere in the room. If you're stood there and your body language and you're really bored and you don't want to be there, you're having to do this presentation again, people don't want to listen to you because it's boring. You're bored. Why would they get excited about it? Use your voice, change the volume, change the pitch, make yourself the most interesting thing in the room so they can't look away from you. And again, body language, stand up tall. Enthusiasm, so dad jokes and memes, I avoid these. I'm not very good at telling jokes. In fact, I'm very bad at it. I tried it a couple of times and they did not work. So I now avoid it like the plague. But a good joke from the right person can be amazing. So consider using jokes. I avoid them because I'm not very good at it. Nobody ever laughs. You've got to be an expert. So it's okay not to know everything, but you do have to know what you're presenting on the day. So make sure you know your presentation really well. Dealing with questions, irrelevant questions, some questions you should know the answer to. You'll get questions you don't understand and questions you can't hear. Just get some set responses. We'll look into that. Oh, that was beyond the scope of this project. I hope that answered your question, but I'm happy to chat in the break. And don't underestimate the power of I don't know. You can't know everything. You won't know everything. And people don't expect you to know everything. So if you don't know, fess up and just say, I don't know. Maybe we can have a chat afterwards. Again, so use your slides, know the limitations of your work, and these are some good responses to difficult questions. So you might get somebody saying to you, oh, well, we found the opposite. How did you find that? Or have you considered this? Why didn't you do it this way? Why did you do it that way? So responses to these questions, you just really have to be confident and just say, you know, I don't know. Just don't ever blag it. Blagging it is never a good way to deal with questions because they'll know that you're blagging it and you're kind of digging yourself into a hole. So you can say things like, that's a great question. You know, we can catch up about this later. Again, beyond the scope of this project, you can't do everything. Good question. Unfortunately, we didn't look into that. And it's okay. You can't look into everything. Never dismiss a question. Even if you think it's irrelevant or stupid, acknowledge it. Make out that it was an amazing question and you appreciate their input. Thank you so much for that question. We'll chat afterwards. Don't dismiss anybody's questions or try and make people feel inferior. It's not good. And lastly, just try to enjoy it. This is your moment in the spotlight. You deserve to be there. You've worked really hard on this research. Present it. Try to avoid imposter syndrome. Everybody gets it at some point, but that's okay. We all do. So remember the 4 P's for success. You've got to plan, you've got to prepare, practice, and you've got to give a good performance. And that's it. So thank you very much. I hope I kind of got to the point for you all, and hopefully some of that was useful. So any questions? I'm happy to answer them. Thank you. Oh, Raisa, good.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Alex.
Do you want me to stop sharing, or shall I keep them in case I need to flick back to a slide?
Ooh, maybe you need to flick back to the slide. Stay on, stay on. Getting lots of applause. Is there a question from the floor? Put your cameras on if you can, because it'd be great to see you.
Yay.
One of the things that I really liked and found awfully frustrating was that you were fantastic at doing what you practice what you preach, right? So we're sharing your screen now. So what you actually did was every time I had a question, you already answered it. Or you were about to answer it. So it was like you told us to anticipate questions and you told us to put it in your slides. And you did that. So I wanted to know about engagement techniques for online versus face-to-face. You gave us some. I wanted to know about, how do you calm your nerves? And then you bloody told me. So I really liked how you practiced exactly what you told us to do.
Yeah.
So anybody have a question for us? Well, not me at all, Alex, because she's the expert here. Hey, Vinay. Feel free to ask your question, mate.
Hey, Ray. Thanks, Alex. That was really good, and I echo what Ray just said. I had a question, and you just answered it at the end of the talk. My question is more about how you prepare the talk. If you're not entirely sure about the audience, I mean, you can sort of get an idea of whether this is a specialist audience or a non-specialist audience. But then, for example, I'm talking at the research symposium next week at the hospital, where I anticipate there will be some medical, some nursing, some allied health, and how you sort of, because I've given the same talk before to a specialist. Now I need to sort of titrate it. And I think I have sort of calibrated it, but what are your thoughts? What do you do if you're sort of unsure about the breadth of experience or expertise in the audience?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vinay. So I always pitch it lower. So you can start off quite low. If you don't know what the audience is like, you're better off starting a little bit at a lower level and then building. You can build quite quickly because you will have people there that will know what you're talking about. But quite often, people appreciate having some of that basic information again, just as a reminder. It doesn't hurt to remind people of the basics, but just try and move through it as quick as you can. So I would say try and get back to the lowest level you can, and then just build it up quite quickly. Because if you go straight in at a higher level, you're going to lose all these people straight away. They're going to really struggle, and they might be really interested in what you're saying, but they just can't get to where you started, and then they've just been lost throughout the whole presentation. So that's generally what I do.
Thank you.
Another one?
Any other questions?
Alex, you spoke about nerves and you spoke about how you calm them. I really liked the glass of water. I thought that was great. Another thing I super liked, and I haven't done yet, but I'm so going to embed it somewhere. I like that. I hope that I've answered your question. I'm happy to chat in the break. I love that. That was a great way to think of. I'm not quite sure I've answered it, but let's not get bogged down. I super like that.
Yeah, I mean, nerves, generally it's the questions, because you can prepare the presentation. As long as you practice, that's going to go okay. It's the questions you can't control. And I've had situations where someone's asked me a question and I've not understood what they're asking me. And I'm like, I don't think I quite understood that. It's okay to ask for clarification. Just say, sorry, can you repeat the question? Again, don't blag it. Don't think you've understood what they've said and then just go off at a tangent. Just get them to repeat the question. And I've had the problem of I've not been able to hear the person, and I've had to get close to them and say, sorry, can you repeat the question? Because I didn't even actually hear you. It's okay to get clarification. Don't be afraid of doing that. And yeah, if you don't know the answer, just say it and just have a chat with them afterwards. And it's fine.
At the risk of giving you a question that you might not have prepared for, what I was wondering, like, we all have, I mean, those of us who present have times where it's gone badly, and hopefully the best thing we can do is learn from it.
Yep.
But have you got an example? Have you got an example of a situation that you felt like it didn't happen the way you wanted it to? It doesn't necessarily have to be your worst moment, but something that you haven't managed to repress yet that you'd like to share with us.
I have so many. I really do. Basically, if it could go wrong, it has gone wrong for me. A recent event actually with the medicine cohort. So we've rolled out now across campus to Cairns, and I was asked to trial some new tech with the OWL. And this is like a little camera that switches around as people start talking. So they were trying to get this to work, and the whole system basically crashed. I lost Cairns, or I thought I'd lost Cairns, and I still had Townsville. So when the technical guy came and he was trying to fix stuff, I literally grabbed a whiteboard that was behind me, and I pulled the whiteboard over, and I just started drawing stuff and asking questions. And I got lots of feedback from students saying, thank you so much for keeping going. Often lecturers will just stop and they'll just stand there for 10 minutes and not do anything. But to actually just get a whiteboard, okay, so we've lost the system. What's the backup? There's a whiteboard, I've got a pen, let's draw something. And then we just went through it that way, because you don't want to just stand there for 10 minutes not doing anything. Use what you've got in the room. So backups are really important as well.
Yeah, but not just, I like that, not just backup for tech, not just a USB that you have, not a backup way of presenting, you know, and it dovetails on that idea about know your stuff.
Yeah.
So if you know your stuff, present it in a different way. That's clever.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the participants from the floor? A lot of you are presenting in the next month. How are you going with it all? You right? Any questions?
You can ask me anything.
Oh, good. Emily has a question. I'm going to pretend I actually
Well done, Emily.
Figure out how to read that.
Oh.
All right. Alex has a quick question about slide animation. Should they be used when giving presentations? She likes to use them to give more flow to the slide, to reduce being overwhelmed by myself and the audience, for myself and the audience. However, a lot of people don't like them. Thoughts?
I like animations. You just have to, I think the difficulty with animations is don't use too many. So use it to emphasize. I didn't use too many in this presentation, but often I will use it to emphasize specific points. But yeah, if you've got your bullet points and everyone's flying in after the other, it gets a bit like, well, why are we doing this? But if you're really emphasizing a point and you want it to flash, change color, swoop in, dive out, that's fine. I really like animations in terms of highlighting points, but don't use it for everything, because you can overuse them. And I think that's where people's dislike come in for animations, but I think they can be really useful.
Use judiciously. Fair enough.
Yes.
Anybody else like to ask a question before we go? Oh, Emily says thank you. All right, everybody. I'll let you go now. Thank you very much for coming and participating. Thanks heaps to Alex. They were great tips. I wrote lots of notes. I have to present in a little while, so I too wrote lots of notes. And I love practice, practice, practice. Absolutely. Yes. Couldn't agree more. Congratulations. Thank you very much for the chat today. And good luck, everybody who's presenting in the near future. I look forward to seeing you all present.
Yeah. Good luck. And if you've got any help, you can email me. My email was on the front slide.
Whoa.
If you want to.
And the slides will be, the webinar will be posted in the next 30 minutes. Wow. Not 30 minutes. I've got to wait till it's done. 30 hours. Yeah, that one. Yep. I'll do it. All right.
Beautiful.
Thanks heaps, guys.
Thank you.
See you later.